So today we're going to go over the spot removal tool in Lightroom. It's this little guy over here. The keyboard shortcut is Q. And I'm going to show you on 3 different images how I use the spot removal tool. It has quite a few possible uses. I'm just going to show you 3 to kind of get your imagination going. So right off the bat, as you might well expect, it works well for fixing minor blemishes in the skin. I'm going to click on the spot removal tool. Now you can adjust the brush size and softness all with your scroll wheel on your mouse. So right now I'm scrolling up. It's making the brush bigger, and I'm scrolling down and it'll make it smaller. Now, similar to the adjustment brush, that inner ring signifies 100% affectivity in the brush. The outer ring represents 0, which means nothing outside of that outer ring will be affected by this brush. So the area between those 2 rings represents the feathering or tapering out of the brush's effectiveness. So we can hold the Shift key and scroll in or out, and that'll change the hardness or softness of the brush. You can see over here, as I do that those numbers are slowly changing, which means if you feel more comfortable with it, you can drag these sliders over here and adjust the brush size and softness. Now, I rarely use opacity for the cloning spot removal tool, just because if I'm using the spot removal tool, there is a very distinct spot I want gone, and I don't want it to remain partially there. So I'm just going to make my brush a little bit smaller. I'm going to get rid of this little mark here by just clicking. The computer will try and do its absolute best to sample pixels that match the area that we're replacing. But you can see it's grabbing this wrinkle line here, and we're getting a duplicate right here just underneath that mark, and I don't want that line. So I'm just going to click and drag this area down to a cleaner set of pixels. You can see right here, even though we got rid of the wrinkle line, these pixels are much sharper and detailed than the pixels surrounding the area, which means we need to select pixel selection that has the same, roughly the same pixel density and focus. That's looking pretty good right there. I'm happy with that. I'm going to hold the space bar, click and drag up to move down the image. And we've got a couple other smaller ones we're going to get rid of. So I'm going to drop my brush size again. I click right here. And right here. And you can see again with this one, it's sampled pixels that we don't really want. We don't want to get this dimple over here that will look odd. So we're going to click and drag our sample source over to a cleaner set of pixels. And get this guy. Now, with the spot removal tool, you can see that you have 2 controls over here. Clone, which I am not using, when we click it, what it is going to do is it is going to sample the select part of the pixels and make an exact copy over here. So it is going to take exactly what you see here and duplicate it in this area. Now you can see when I clicked that control, we were already selected on this selection. I'm going to zoom in even further so you can see what I'm talking about. So the reason why cloning doesn't work here is because the sample pixels are much lighter than the replaced pixels, and so it looks out of place. We've got this hot spot because these pixels are darker, these pixels are lighter. So we're going to change this one back to heal. What heal does is it takes the relative pixel texture and applies the luminosity of the source pixels. So it'll match the lightness and darkness of the source pixels with the same texture as the sampled pixels. Think of it this way. Clone makes an exact copy of the source. Heal replaces texture while matching lighting and coloring. So it is rare for me to use clone. We will use it on occasion, but more often than not, I'm going to use the heal tool instead of the cloning tool. When we're done with that, we just hit done, and our spot removal tool usage is complete. So we've just fixed a few of the skin blemishes and cleaned up the image. Now I will tell you this, anything more than just a couple skin blemishes, I will take the image into Photoshop for more advanced and refined skin retouching, just because the engine that powers Lightroom has to think a lot longer. So doing more than just a couple spot removals will take a lot more time just because Lightroom isn't built to handle a lot of spot removal. That's not what it's for. Photoshop processes it much quicker, and so if, like I said, if I have more than just a couple spots to remove, I'll take it into Photoshop because the cloning and healing tools in Photoshop are much, much more effective. That's beside the point. We're playing with Lightroom today. So there's spot removal with the portrait. And I'm going to show you a couple other ways that I've used the same tool for a different effect. So with this image, this is just a basic straight out of the camera test shot. One of the things that you will see is all these little black specks in the sky. What those specks are is dust on the sensor. This was a camera that I was using a couple years ago, and it really, really, really needed the sensor to be cleaned. Really bad. This is a lot of sensor dust. But unfortunately, I was not able to go back and clean it up, so all of my images from this particular shoot had these sensor spots, and I needed to be able to get rid of them. So I'm going to use that spot removal tool. I'm going to keep it on heal, and I'm just going to place that crosshair's center on the middle of each and every spot. I'm just going to click on a few. So you can see as I click on each one, it is sampling similar source pixels and replacing the texture without losing any of my color. I'm not going to do this whole image because you can see there are a lot of spots. But this one right here, you can see it's more of a line. We've got a couple different options here. I'm going to zoom in so you can see even more what I'm talking about. I can either increase my brush, or if you click and drag, you can draw a spot removal or healing line. Now, unfortunately, this is the best that Lightroom gives us. We get this white splotch, and it doesn't show us a refined look of what pixels are being replaced. For something more advanced, again, you are going to want to go to Photoshop because the tools in Lightroom aren't built to handle massive processing like this. It's supposed to be a very lightweight, the occasional spot removal tool, but for anything larger than just a couple spots, again, I'm going to take it in Photoshop. So, let's get a couple more here. And this is real time. You can see all of this time in between clicking. That's how much time it's taking Lightroom to calculate and clean things up. It's a very time-consuming procedure in Lightroom, and this is why I do it in Photoshop, because I have to click and wait for every single instance, and that just, it's a waste of time. Photoshop has the ability to take care of stuff like this much quicker and much simpler, so that's basically just my only reason, is I get tired of waiting on Lightroom to think through which pixels to sample, and I think it has largely to do with the fact that Lightroom is supposed to be a basic editor and Photoshop is supposed to be your advanced editor. And what we are doing is more or less an advanced technique in a basic editing program. So, I think that takes care of that pretty well. If you were wondering, chances are, yes, there will be sensor dust spots down here in this textured part of the photograph. However, because of the nature of the texture, we're not going to see them. For sensor dust, they really only show up in broad, clean areas where the pixels are relatively the same. But if you have a dirty sensor and you don't realize it until after the shoot, this is a great way to clean it up. Now, the nice thing about doing it in Lightroom, and I will give it this plug, if you have sensor dust spots, and you know they're in all the exact positions on all of your images, you can process and use the spot removal tool. We can copy those settings by hitting Command or Control C, and we want to make sure that the spot removal box is checked. When you copy that, you can paste that to all the other images in your shoot, and it will apply all of those spot removals to all of your images. So the batch processing is more effective in Lightroom. So for sensor dust spots, I will use the spot removal in Lightroom just so I can save time and process all of my images with the same spot removal techniques. For a single image, again, I will take that in Photoshop. The last way I'm going to use the spot removal tool is I was taking a picture of this sunset, and I was just a little bit too wide of an angle, and I got the roof of the balcony that I'm standing underneath. So I'm going to make my spot removal brush bigger, and I'm going to click and drag where that roof was. And again, that is real time, and it takes a long time to process. So we're going to zoom in, and you can see it didn't quite get that roof selection. That's okay. All I'm going to do now is take my feathering down, and that cleaned that up quite nicely. The reason why it was still showing through is the feathering was so feathered that by the time it got back into 100% effectivity, the roof was still present. So by lowering our feathering, we were able to get those pixels to clean up all the way through where that roof was. And then I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to click and drag. And again, it is kind of difficult because I'm basically guessing where I think the roof is and just trying to get it close. Okay, so you can see it kind of did okay, but it's not perfect and something is obviously amiss. That's because Lightroom just is not built to handle processing advanced edits like this. And I have tried this 3 or 4 times before this specific part of the recording. Those have just been edited out for the video. But each time I tried it, it gave me the same results. It cannot remove that section of the roof cleanly. This is a perfect example of something that will have to be taken into Photoshop to effectively clean it up, because Lightroom just doesn't know what to do with it. And that's just okay. You know, our options at this point, we can be done with the spot removal, and we can use our crop tool to crop it out. And that's beyond that, that's about all we can do in Lightroom. Anything more, we're going to have to take it into Photoshop. So, for all intents and purposes today, we'll just crop it and call it good. So I hope this helps give you an idea of what kind of capabilities the spot removal tool has. As I hope you have been able to see with this video, it does have some very specific limitations. And depending on what you are trying to accomplish with your edits, I think it's important to understand its limitations and know when to take an image into Photoshop or whether to leave it in Lightroom. Now, as I'm sure you've noticed, my channel is mostly Lightroom videos at this point. We will be adding Photoshop videos in the near future. We're just covering basic processing techniques right now, but I will be adding some more advanced techniques in Photoshop very shortly. So stay tuned. Thanks for watching.